guys. You guys. Oh, you're wonderful. You never disappoint. You never disappoint. My name is Leland Klassen. I'm the host of Comedy Street. Welcome to Comedy Street, folks. Welcome. Wow. We have got an exciting show for you tonight. Incredibly funny man. Phil Callaway is going to be coming on a little later. Why don't you make him feel happy? Feel happy, folks. Boy, I'm excited. I came from a long ways to be here, sir. Did you too come from a long ways?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. Where did you come from? West of Winnipeg. West End, which is a drive to the central part of Winnipeg. Yeah. Great. What is your name, sir? John. John. You said Jan or John? John. John. Whoa. Wow. It sounded like Jan. You got a bit of an accent. I guess you West Enders. Is that? What do you do for a living, Jan? You're a mechanic. What do we talk about? Heavy machinery? Planes. Thanks for sitting up front. You ready to get Phil Callaway up to do the show, folks? You guys are in for a real treat. This guy is fabulous. Every time I go see him speak, I go away laughing, and I go away taking something back with me. And folks, I think you're going to do the same. So put your hands together, folks, for the fabulous Phil Callaway.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you very much. I last time got my water mixed up with Leland's and my hand is growing. Kid you not. No, it isn't. Well, we came from Alberta this morning, flew into Winnipeg, and figured out that's pretty much the best way to see Saskatchewan. Nah, I married a Saskatchewan girl, so I can say things like that and hopefully get away with it. Well, thank you for coming here tonight. You are really in for a treat, and I've met the other guys back in the green room, which I don't even know if it's green, Leland, but anyway, you are in for a treat. And how many of you here have children? Tons of you. How many of you know some children? And this is a tough one. John, are you listening? How many of you were once a child yourself? Yes, 11, 12. So what's the deal? Like, was it free for anyone associated with the airline industry? Are there captains here? We love you guys. Yeah, we really do. So you've had children, or many of you have. Do you ever worry about them? You ever wonder about them? My wife and I had 3 kids in 3 years. Anyone done better than that? Come on, anyone? No, I don't see any hands. Someone asked me what it's like to have 3 kids in 3 years, and I said, well, we are far more satisfied than the guy who has $3 million. Well, how so? Well, the guy with $3 million wants more. Actually, we really, in all seriousness, are very thankful for our kids some of the time. We really are. But, you know, you get wondering with kids if they're really learning anything at all, don't you? This generation, you sit around the table at supper time and you ask them, so what did you learn today? And what do they say? Nothing. Your kids do that too. And then they bring home their report cards and you find out they are not lying. Huh? They are not lying. They go to Sunday school. They learn interesting things there. They learn things like the first commandment, one little kid said, was when Eve told Adam to eat the apple. First commandment. First commandment makes sense. A husband, one little guy said, should have only one wife. This is called monotony. If you're married here, you know that it is not monotonous. My favorite was a little girl who said, "Did you know that Lot's wife was a pillar of salt by day but a ball of fire by night?" Kids, you just never know, do you? We have 3 of them, and they are, what are they now? They are 11, 12, and 14. No, I don't know. They're in there somewhere. They're in there somewhere, and I think we have 3. How many of you guys know how many kids you have? Quick question. Okay, 2 of you. All right, very good. But we do never know what these kids are going to say. We were seated in church one morning, Jeffrey and I, right down near the front, and he was putting up a noise that you could hear in Barbados, and I had to get him out of there. So I grabbed him and I took him up the center aisle, and pushed the doors open, and Jeffrey yelled over my shoulder, "Pray for me!" Pray for me. Rachel, she went to school one day. We found out that she stood up in front of the class and told the teacher and all the kids there, "My mom won't be having any more kids because her tubes are tired." How many of you ladies have tired tubes tonight? Some of you? Stephen and I, he's a little older, but when he was about 5, we were walking by a graveyard on a Sunday afternoon out for a walk, and there was a hole dug and a big pile of dirt beside it, and Stephen looked at it and said, "Look, one got out!" One got out. Well, you know what? I'm a Christian, and I have to tell you that in the midst of all that's going on, the reason that I can laugh is because one got out, because Jesus Christ is risen, and I'm very thankful. How many of you would say laughter is a good thing? Yeah? You love to laugh. But you know what? Sometimes we're not doing enough of it, are we? I was speaking at a minister's retreat not too long ago, and I noticed a couple down about where John is. Is this your wife? Yes. Okay, what's your wife's name? Bev. Okay, John and Bev. They were seated down about where you were, but they were a little older and pretty serious. She was actually a brilliant woman. She was laughing at all my jokes. She was, sorry, I'm sorry. But her husband looked at me. Just looked at me so sour, he looked like he could suck buttons off a sofa. He was that sour. For 3 days, I tried everything I could to make this guy laugh. And after 3 days of him not laughing at all, he was looking at me. His wife came up to me and she shook my hand and she said, "Phil, I just want to thank you. I have not seen my husband laugh this hard in years." Well, they say that the average child laughs 200 times a day, but by the time we become the average adult, we laugh 6 times a day. Where? Would someone tell me, did we lose 194 laughs? I have a theory, okay? See what you think of it. I started to lose my sense of humor along about 5th grade when Miss Ida Weissmuller came across the ocean on a boat to conduct experiments in our classroom, and I was one of those experiments, and she had about had enough of me by September the 4th. I remember the day she looked down, she'd tried various things on me and my body, and none of them seemed to work. She looked down at me, and there I was, and she said, "Philip, will you stand and tell us what is so funny?" And I was an obedient child. I stood to my feet, and I couldn't tell her. I just realized I can't tell her the joke I told Bobby Spaulding. It is not suitable. So she said, "Philip, you will come forward." And I did. I came forward. And she said, "You will stand beside the podium. Right here. Right now." And I did. She said, "This is your punishment. You will face the class for 1 hour." Well, I got standing there thinking to myself, you know, for some people this would be punishment. For me, this is the knock-knock of opportunity. So as Miss Weissmuller turned to the blackboard and etched fractions on it, I did some things. I'm not proud of any of them, but let me tell you about them. You don't have to do much to make people laugh in that situation. I took my left hand and put it under my right armpit and brought it down repeatedly, and it's amazing how much laughter there was. And then I just took my comb and I went... I don't know if any of you have been hit by flying chalk. Any of you? Huh? Close, yeah. But it tends to take a little of the laughter out of your body, doesn't it? It just does. And I don't know. It's a theory I have for why we start laughing a little less as we grow older. I was a kid, actually, for the first few years of my life. I don't know about you guys. But I was. We used to do things, and of course, none of them were proud of. But I remember sneaking up behind Mr. Poor, who was out. He was tending his corn patch one night in the garden there, and it was growing dark, and he was weeding it very carefully. And I snuck up behind him. I had a balloon which I had blown to maximum capacity. And I really brought that thing, the sides together as quickly as I could. And he turned to me, and he was so mad. I tell you what, there are some things that you just shouldn't do as a kid. But he turned to me, and finally I got him settled down and was able to help him a little bit. And he said, I said, what you doing? And he said, I'm planting corn. And I said, why? And he said, so it'll grow. I'm weeding it so it'll grow. And I said, well, why? And he said, so it will get bigger, so we can eat it. I said, why? He said, so we can strangle kids like you who ask too many questions. I asked a lot of questions when I was a kid. I don't know about you. Did you ask a lot of questions? I still do. I think when I grow up, I want to be a kid. How about you? I do. I used to ask questions like, why is the word abbreviation so long? Remember asking that question? Or, why doesn't glue stick to the inside of the bottle? Those kind of questions, which just trouble people for years. I asked too many questions, can fat people go skinny dipping, this kind of thing. And it gets you into trouble. I actually thought for the first few years of my life that my name was Smarten Up. I did. Hey, Smarten Up! And grown-ups, they get tired of your questions. They just start ordering you around. They tell you what to do. You remember this? They tell you what to do. They say things like, quiet down, simmer down, settle down, slow down, sit down. Remember this? None of you have experienced this, I'm sure. And then they tell you at night, if you don't lay down, I'll come down there, and you'll wish I hadn't gotten up. And then you get up in the morning, they say, get up. They say, get up, get up. And they say, hurry up, listen up, smarten up. Remember? Smarten up, wise up, pick that up, eat up, brush up, straighten up. And then they say, shut up. Did anyone ever say that to you? And the worst one of all, grow up. Do you remember that? Because I didn't really want to grow up. Does that mean that if I grow up, I'm going to be like you? I hope not. But you never said that. You were polite and would not say this kind of thing. Growing up. I had trouble in school. My math marks, everything actually, was slipping by about kindergarten. I started school in first grade, and my father was actually in sixth grade at the time, and I caught up to him in seventh grade, and we quit together. No, if my children are watching this, that's not true. Grandpa is a good citizen. He really is. But my dad was part Scotch. Actually, is part Scotch, part ginger ale. No, he really isn't. You know that on Mother's Day, more phone calls are placed home than any other day of the year. Did you realize this? But did you know that on Father's Day, more collect calls are placed home? It's true. It's a fact. And I think I know why. I think it's because our fathers cut our hair. How many of you, your dads cut your hair? Yes, sir. I can see that, actually. Looking good. Any of you cut your kids' hair? Yeah, revenge? My dad had a method for cutting hair. I would sit on a stool, and he would come along and put something that was awful over my shoulders, which itched for weeks, and would stand on one side of me and cut my hair there, and then would go around to the other side and, relying on memory, try to even it up, which took a while and had him going around the chair a lot. And so by the end of about an hour, I felt very old and looked old and had to wear a hat and could have been shoved right under a door. I was that thin from all the cutting going on. So I don't know. How many of you, did your dad ever spank you? Some of you. Oh, some of you. I just saw you wince. Because our dads, when they spanked us, you knew you'd been spanked. My mother's spankings were more like apologies. It really did hurt her more than me. Huh? It did, but not with my dad. How many of you were spanked in school? Oh, yes. Oh, we could have a support group just right here. But do you remember this? I mean, there were some wonderful things about being strapped in school, weren't there? Just some wonderful things. I mean, you could be a celebrity for up to an afternoon after getting the strap. Do you remember? Oh, yeah. I tell you, you'd come out of the office. Oh, and people would be standing around and they would ask you questions like, what? What did they ask you? What did you do? And I said, well, I cut one of Beth Freeman's pigtails off. It was just there. It was in front of me. What was I to do? What else did they ask you?
How many?
How many times? Oh, hundreds of times. What else? Did it hurt? What did you say? No. No. And they said, well, while you were in there, did you happen to see who was doing all that screaming? I used to get it a lot. I remember one day walking home. I had to push my bike. I couldn't ride it. And Steve Poor was with me, and we were throwing dirt clods at trees. And he looked at me, he said, Phil, he said, man, you sure get it a lot. What's the deal with you anyway? I said, I don't know. But I do know that every time I get sent to the office, I look down and I have these same green pants on. He said, she doesn't like your pants? I said, I don't know. I don't think so. I said, I don't know what the deal is. He said, I've got an idea. Let's burn them. I said, Steve, that is the single most ridiculous thing I've heard in some time, so let's do it. And we did that afternoon in 1972. We got home there and we burned my green cotton pants in the backyard in a brick fireplace my father had built for other purposes. I remember earlier that day standing before Miss Ida Weissmuller, who got up every morning and pulled her hair into a bun, which was too tight to allow her much smiling. And she stood before me and she said, Philip, what is the punishment for being kicked out of music class 3 times in a row? And I looked up at her, I was terrified. How many of you speak German? Many of you do. That's good. But you know what? It's really hard to speak German without sounding angry. I'm sorry. But you know, I was standing there and she said, what is the punishment? And I had to go over to my desk. I was so terrified of this huge German woman that I wrote out S-T-R-A-P and I handed it over to her and she took me up on it. That was what brought me to that fireplace in the backyard and the pants burning, and Steve said, watch, a little demon will come running out. And we watched, but nothing strange happened except other things that were going on there. But looking back on that, think of that day and think that, you know what, I am just as scared today as the day I burned my green cotton pants in the backyard. Because I now have 3 school-age children of my own. Kids that are starting to look a lot like me. And so I asked myself, is there any hope for the children of a guy who burned his green cotton pants in 1972? And the obvious answer is no. Except, I think, for a few things. I had parents who spent more time talking about me on their knees than they did anywhere else. They prayed for me. And they lived it. And, you know, I happen to know a great deal of Bible verses, including the one about the sins of the fathers visiting the children. Have you heard that Bible verse? You know? But, you know, you should go back there and keep reading because it says that he's going to give his love to 1,000 generations of those who obey him. Ain't that good news? It sure is when you've got kids the age of mine. Children, they change our lives. And they change our wallets. They take a lot from us. They do a lot of things. Well, I've had a haircut. But now it's getting to the age where my hair has gone underground and is coming out my nose. I don't know. How many of you are at that age? Some of you? Yeah. I see. I'm in it with you together. I don't know what it was about 5th grade and Miss Ida Weissmuller, but it was quite a year. My friend and I, we went out and we dug a fort deep into the bowels of the earth in a little town called 3 Hills, Alberta, Canada. And there we were in the woods, and we had this beautiful fort. Any of you heard of recycling? Anyone? But do you know who invented it? It was us. Let me tell you how that happened. We dug this fort into the earth, and we sat atop it, protecting it from passersby. And one day, Gary looked at me, and he said, Phil, I'm bored. which was terrible to hear in those days, in the long, long days of August. And I said, well, Steve, how about we stop protecting this fort and we start saving the earth? And this was new at the time, before Greenpeace or any of those things. And I had to explain it to him, and then it made perfect sense. So we went to my mother's kitchen, and we got 2 brown paper bags, big ones, and we went downtown Three Hills, and we got going down the street picking up every cigarette butt we could find and putting them in the bag. I said, Steve, can you believe people actually smoke these things? Can't believe it. This is really disgusting. Put them in the bag, we'll throw them in the trash. And we did. Tons of them. Elderly people came by and looked at us. Oh, there is hope for the world, they said. Young people cleaning our streets, and we thanked them. And we took that bag back to our fort in the woods, and we recycled it. We recycled every last one of them right down to the filters. And unlike certain presidents, we inhaled. We did. I think we pretty much recycled anything we could get our lips around that summer. Dried dandelions, pencil shavings. What for some of you? John, what was it for you? Nothing, sure. There's a liar right over here. Some of you other guys, what did you recycle? Mustard seed? Yeah. Or just mustard straight out of the bottle. No? You didn't do anything? We were perfect in every way. Couldn't wait to get up in the morning to look in the mirror. You got better looking each day. I know the feeling. But not me, I tell you, we recycled everything. Cardboard, newspaper, cinnamon, you name it. And we were on a plane today headed out here, and I looked up and there were 2 amber symbols lit up. No smoking seat belts. I thought, yeah, well, we'd have smoked those. You know, you burn your lips on the buckle. But hey, we'd have tried them. It was a Wednesday that completely changed my life. Gary came whipping along, my friend Gary, on his banana seat bicycle, the guy that we had been recycling together, and he said, you ain't gonna believe it, it's too good to be true, you gotta guess. I said, what? Your mother bought you all the candy you could eat for life? He said, no, way better. I found a pack of them. It ain't even been opened. I said, no way. He said, yes, way, come with me. And we took off on our banana seat bicycles out of town, 2 miles in record time. And sure enough, there it was, in the tall shadow of a telephone pole, proof that Gary was not lying. A package of Player's Filter Tip, unopened and beckoning. We looked around us very carefully when we stripped the plastic off, because my brother had told me the punishment for smoking in our little community with the little church that we went to. He said, they cut your lips off. So we had to be careful. We divided the pack evenly, 10 apiece, and we sat in those weeds and we smoked them one by one right down to the filters. And yes, we inhaled. And after about a half an hour, I got up. And I said, Gary, I said, let's never ever, as long as we both shall live, touch another one of these. And we shook tobacco-stained hands on it. And we went back to the non-smoking zone. About a half an hour later, Gary's mother was standing outside the family restroom wondering who had established a tobacco plantation on her property without securing permission. She opened the door and there was Gary in the bathtub, caught, yellow-handed. All he could think of to say was, I was smoking, Mom. But I was older and I was much wiser. I knew that as ye smoke, so shall ye reek. And so, in an effort to keep the consequences of my own sins at bay, I snuck silently up our back steps and into the bathroom, opened the medicine cabinet. Some of you older people remember spray deodorant? I finished a whole can of that. And a full tube of toothpaste, and I was finally able to approach my parents. My son, you smell nice. I said, thank you. And that night I crept into bed, a very satisfied smile stuck to my face. No one will ever know. My mom came into my room and lifted the window, got some air going in there. Sat down on the bed, she said, so son, how did it taste? I said, supper, Mother. Oh, it was very good, thank you. She didn't skip a beat. She said, when I was a little girl, my grandpa let me smoke his pipe. I didn't much like it. How about you? And I said, me neither, Mom. And then I closed my eyes and I stuck out my lips because I knew the punishment. And I guess she could have cut my lips off. She could have spanked me at least. This had been done on previous occasions. She could have reminded me that no amount of toothpaste or deodorant will cover my sins. That they really are going to find me out. She could have reminded me that the story doesn't end there. Because of what Jesus Christ did on an old rugged cross, we don't have to hide. We can approach God forever forgiven. Instead, she just bent over and she kissed me on the forehead and she said, I love you, son. And I said, Mama, I'll never smoke again. And I guess I haven't. And then I said, Mom, how did you know? She said, son, well, sometimes 10-year-old boys forget that their mothers have friends too. And I heard Dad yelling from the bathroom, hey, has anyone seen the deodorant? My mother believed God's grace was too good to keep to herself, and she passed it on to me. And I'm here with you tonight because of that. Do you ever, any of you have any friends? Couple of you? Did I see a hand? I like to have friends. I think it's a good thing. I think it's a good idea, but sometimes they're trouble. And I remember the day that Vance moved in next door to me, became my new neighbor, Vance Newdorf, a good Mennonite. He loved, I liked this guy actually at the start because he would tell me Mennonite jokes. He just loved to tell Mennonite jokes, and I guess Mennonites tell them best. He said, did you know that there's conclusive proof that Adam was a Mennonite? I said, no. He said, yeah, who else would stand beside a naked woman and be tempted by an apple? I said, you don't know the Mennonites I know, but anyway. He's quite a guy. Anyway, he moved in there and things were going great until the day he came over on a Saturday and he insulted my lawnmower, if you can imagine that. I was cutting the grass and I flipped my lawnmower off and he looked at it and he said, electric lawnmower? Those are for wimps. You should have a gas-powered lawnmower like mine, a man's lawnmower. I didn't like him at all. For the next week, I didn't like him at all. And then my lawnmower quit. It quit very loud. It quit. People came from other blocks to just see there. And just, oh, so that was it. Yeah. Yeah, we heard that. Yeah. And I had to humble myself and go over to Vance's place and ask to borrow his lawnmower. Oh, he said, yeah. He said, come here. And he took me out by the shed. They're out by the garbage can, actually, if I recall correctly. No, maybe not. But anyway, it was there beside the shed. He said, here, he said, just look at this. He said, just feel the handlebars. And I did. It felt great. He said, pull it. And I pulled it, and it started right up. And I took it to my yard, and I cut the grass. It was beautiful in record time. And I returned it, and a week later, I had to cut the grass again. So I went over to Vance, and I knocked on the door. No one was home. I thought, you know what, we are such good friends now, I will just borrow it, there's no problem. So I went out there and I got the thing and I took it over to my yard and I started cutting the grass. It was going great until I got way to the back to the stump, something about this big around, a couple inches in the air. I thought, you know what, last week I went around it, this week I'll just go over it. Needs trimmed anyway. You know, a man's lawnmower shouldn't be a problem. Bang! This thing stopped dead, never to start again. I am not a mechanical person like you, John. I just can't. I like looking at things which are broken, however. I do. I like looking. I don't know how you guys are, but, you know, I can open up your car hood and go, yeah, that's your battery right there. That could be a problem. And I turned over the lawnmower and oil was dripping out of it. Crankshaft bent like this, you know. Not a good sign. You could not even pull the cord. Well, my dad, when I was just a little boy, told me what to do if ever you borrow something, son. He said, return it. So I did. I took it and I returned it, put it right there beside the shed, and then I left on a 5-day business trip to Washington, D.C. Some of you aren't liking me right now. I can feel this. I just feel this. I came home from that trip, and there was Vance waiting in my driveway. I pulled in. I actually, now that I think of it, should have hit him. No, don't do this. I pulled in there, and he was waiting for me. He said, hi, Phil. And he said, come. Do you have a flashlight? It was growing dark. I went into the house. I got a flashlight, brought it out back. I thought, this guy is going to club me to death with a flashlight. What a way to go. But he didn't. Instead, he took it over to the stump, and he shone it on the stump. And there it was. Ketchup had been poured all over the stump. A white spray-painted outline of a lawnmower was in the grass beside it. And a yellow police line, do not cross ribbon around the trees. Kid you not. He said, we have a suspect. And then he took me out to the garden. And there, sure enough, protruding from a large mound of earth were handlebars. And a gray brick etched with these words, here lies Mr. Mower. A life so quickly taken by a hand so quick to take. He will never mow what life had in the grass ahead of him. Well, you know what? It's not hard to understand why Vanson is really my best friend today. I don't have any other friends. No, but he is. He's my best friend today. I think it's because he knows how to practice the fine art of forgiveness. But he also knows what every good friend knows. If you expect perfection from people, your whole life is going to be a series of disappointments and grumblings and complaints. But if you set your sights just a little bit lower and accept other people as the imperfect creatures that all of us are, you just may find yourself a lifelong friend. A few days later, Vance's wife, Sherry, went down to Home Hardware. I kid you not, entered to win a lawnmower in a draw, and she won. Today, all because of me. They have a beautiful, shiny red lawnmower in their yard. I haven't asked to borrow this thing yet, but I do keep reminding them just how lucky they are to have me for a friend. Oh, yeah, friends. When you think of someone, maybe it's in your church, I don't know, somewhere who needs you to accept them as the imperfect creatures that we all are. So you have kids, huh? Friends change our lives. Our mothers hopefully sometimes change our lives. Even our fathers change the way we look. Kids. I wrote a book called I Used to Have Answers, Now I Have Kids, which may be your life story. There's a letter I had at the start because we have kids. I have to tell you, I didn't really want to have kids. I hate to confess that to some of you ladies because I know you grow up thinking, man, if there's anything on earth I want to do, it's have children. But for some of us guys, we look at kids and they're a little disgusting. I remember being at a table and with my brother's kids, and I watched them put peas in their ears and corn in their diapers and blow disgusting things out of their nostrils. And then they wanted a kiss. And the single most disgusting thing of all was that their mother gave them one. She did. And I remember later laying on the living room sofa trying to sleep off a turkey hangover. My 1-year-old nephew brought a very ripe diaper to rest on my forehead. And I said out loud, I said audibly, I said, I will have kids just as soon as cows produce Coca-Cola. I will. Just as soon as 4 + 3 = 11. But my wife stood before me one night in some rather expensive lingerie and said, honey, let's have kids, tons of them. And it seemed like a good idea at the time. It really did. But you know, we have these children and we don't really know what to do with them always. But maybe with the first one we know, and then the next one comes along and we still sort of know, and then the third one comes along and he's a complete surprise to us, and everything that we ever knew before just went out the window. And chances are the same little guy will go off to Bible camp and he will write us the following letter. Dear Mom and Dad, our camp counselor told us to write our parents in case you heard about the flood and got worried. Don't worry, we're fine. I got out of the cabin just before it floated away and I still have my toothbrush. Nobody got drowned because most of the kids were out in the woods looking for Isaac. Luckily, black bears aren't as fierce as grizzlies, so Isaac is okay. Please call his mom and tell her. He can't write because of the cast. We never would have found him in the dark if it hadn't been for the lightning. Did you know that if you put a gas can on a fire, it will blow up? Wet wood doesn't burn so good, but tents do. And clothing. Billy is going to look weird until his hair grows back. We'll be home Saturday if Mr. Chadwick gets the van fixed. It wasn't his fault about the accident. The brakes worked fine when we left. It's a neat van. He doesn't need insurance on it. And we can get it dirty or ride on the roof. It gets pretty crowded up there with 15 kids. Mr. Chadwick is cool. He's going to teach me how to drive. Don't worry, he only lets me drive on mountain roads where there isn't much traffic. Just logging trucks and moose. I threw up this morning. Our speaker, Mr. Gibbs, said it was probably just the leftover potato salad. He says he used to get sick like that on the food in prison all the time. I'm so glad he got out and came to teach us about the Bible. Well, I better go. We're going to town to mail these letters and buy bullets. Whoops. Don't worry about a thing. One of the funnest things in all the world I do is something that absolutely terrified me to start with, and it's talking to groups of people like yourselves who are absolutely wonderful to me all over the world. And I thank you for the way you've been. I can't believe people buy my books, but they do. I write books. That's what I do for a living. And thought that 6 people would buy my first book, and they would all be my mother's sisters. But turned into an overnight bestseller, and what do you do with a success? Failure's easier to handle sometimes. So it's been a wild ride for a little while now. But it's also been wonderful once you get things into perspective. We had a call from a large company in California, my wife and I did some time ago, and the president of the company said, Phil, we've been watching your books, we've been seeing what you're doing, and we would like to hire you, and we will, I don't know what you make now, but we will triple it in American dollars. And I said, well, to myself, I have never heard God speak quite so clearly to me on the phone before. I said to my wife, honey, we're going to be able to buy clothes that match for me now. We're going to buy a house that isn't a rental and a car that starts in the winter. This will be marvelous for we Canadians. And my wife, she's wonderful. We just celebrated 19 years, 6 really good ones. She's been wonderful. Actually, I should tell you that my Visa card is missing, but the thief is spending less than my wife. No, it's not true. John, it's not true. She's wonderful. I'm the problem. I know you'd never sense that. But there we were talking about this, so we decided, sure, we got to at least go and see about this. And so we got on a jet and we went down to Seattle and then on to California, and we sat around a large oak boardroom table, and they peppered me with questions, and I guess I answered some of them quite well, because they said, Phil, we want to hire you. And I said, let me ask you a couple questions. And one of them was simply this: how much time will I be gone from home? And they looked at me like I were from another planet. And finally said, I guess a lot of the time. You're going to be gone quite a bit of the time. Most of the time. My wife was kind of kicking me under the table. We climbed back on a plane. She took my hand and she said, honey, life is lived in chapters. Shouldn't this one include me and the children? We would really like to remember you for more than your rear end going out the front door. But I thanked her for her opinion. I knew God's will for my wife, I tell you. We got into Seattle, had a short layover there, and I went to the little boys' room, and I latched the stall door behind me, and as I did, the place began to shake. It was shaking, and I was in the first earthquake of my life. Anyone here been in an earthquake? Yeah, a number of you. Wow, do you want to go back? Yeah? Seriously? Oh, okay, all right. Well, I didn't. I was standing there. I knew the place was going to come in on me. I was going to die. I just knew this. And the guy next to me said, did I do that? And I was speechless in Seattle, I guess. But this place was shaking, and I knew I was going to die. I just did. And I had all these images flash through my mind. And you know what? Not one of them had anything to do with a big house or a fancy car or a step up the ladder to success. They all had to do with people, with the kids God had put into my life, my wife. I got out of there as fast as I could. I ran back to my wife, and I grabbed her. I thought, I'm going to kiss her and let her feel the earth move one last time. Well, we climbed on the plane that day, and I took out an airline napkin and I wrote on it my personal definition of success. I'll consider myself a success when I'm walking close to Jesus every day, when I'm building a strong marriage, loving my kids, and performing meaningful work. I'll consider myself a success when I'm making others homesick for Jesus. I'm ashamed to tell you that it took an earthquake to bring me to that point. Point of realizing that 100 years from now, no one's going to talk about what my car looked like, the size of my house, or the thickness of my wallet. But this world could be a better place if I invested my life in the lives of people around me that God has put into my life. Earthquake. I hope it doesn't take that for you. I turned 35 a few years ago. I'm not going to tell you how many. On the night I turned 35, I tucked my eldest son into bed and I said, "God bless you, son." And he looked up at me. He said, "Dad, how old are you again?" And I said, "I'm 35. He said, "You're half dead." He did. So I kissed him there. I tucked him in. I calmly went across the hallway and removed him from the will. No, I didn't, but you know what? I did get seated in the living room there later on the sofa, thinking to myself, I cannot believe how fast 35 years of my life has gone. Can't believe it. And we pick up speed the closer we get to home. It's true. So I thought, if you're getting this old, Callaway, you better know what you want on your tombstone. So I started looking. There are some pretty good ones out there. There's one that simply says, "See, I told you I was sick." There's one that says, "He should have ducked." Huh? There's another that says, "Here lies an atheist all dressed up, no place to go." One that says, "Let your wind blow free where'er you may be, holding it in was the death of me." I don't know. There's a terrible one near Tallahassee, Florida. A woman whose husband was known as a womanizer in the town had these terrible words etched to her husband's headstone after he died: "Frank, at least I know where you're sleeping tonight." Can you imagine that speaking of your life? I hope not. I hope for every one of us that it'll say better things, that our lives will speak better than that the preacher won't have to lie at your funeral. And I know what I want on my own tombstone. I want it simply to say this: he found God's grace too amazing to keep to himself. He found God's grace too amazing to keep to himself. God bless you, everyone. You've been great to talk to. Good night.
Bill Callaway, folks.